Hi, and welcome to this short and light-hearted presentation on the business of self-publishing. And by the business of self-publishing, I really do mean the business of self-publishing. My name's Ian Park. For a living, I import industrial quantities of Class A drugs, kill people and lie. A lot. In other words, I'm a thriller writer. It's not a bad career if you can get it to pay. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. But let's talk about why self-publish. I'm assuming that if you're watching this, some of you are thinking about self-publishing, have already self-published, or are potentially involved in mainstream publishing, in which case you may want to sit down. So for those who are thinking about, or who have already self-published, can I ask why you're doing so? Is it for non-commercial reasons? Is it for the personal pleasure or satisfaction of seeing your words in print? Is it a way of getting yourself published simply following rejection by mainstream publishers? Is it to self-publish as a commercial business designed to make you money? Or finally, is it a way of demonstrating to publishers who may have rejected your work because they don't see a commercial market for it that this does actually exist? But before we go much further, there's an important question that I'd like to pose, which is, so if you don't have a real publishing contract, you're not a quality writer. Discuss. So it's probably worth asking, why shouldn't you self-publish? Well, there've been quite a lot of people who've self-published who you probably haven't heard of. Look at these no-hopers. And there is a view that the real publishers are the guardians of quality and variety and originality in publishing, so only quality writers get published. Now, you might want to be traditionally published and join the greats, but let's look at what the odds are. According to a presentation by an agent that I caught at a recent literary festival, he receives something like 10 submissions a day. So let's say that's only during weekdays, so that's only 2,400 a year. He tends to ask for further material on, say, 20 to 30 over that year, so that's about 1%. And of those, he probably takes on 3 to 4 a year, which by my maths is something like 0.15%. He then attempts to sell these books to publishers. He has one client he's had for 5 years, where he's actually achieved 0 sales of their fiction, although to be fair, they have eventually got away a non-fiction book. So it's not surprising that some okayish writers don't get any publishing deals. But it actually then gets worse, because the agent effectively says, well, I only take on the ones that I like, and I only put them in front of publishers that I think will like, i.e. buy, those books. Meanwhile, on the same panel there was a publisher who essentially said, well, I only take on those I think will sell. Now I don't have a problem with that. That's the publisher's job. It's to spot books that will sell, take them on, and sell them to make money. It's why publishing is a business. But it does raise an interesting question, which is, well, what will sell? And the answer to that, in a famous phrase from the movie industry, is that no one knows anything. No one can actually tell you what's going to sell. Although, what has sold well for somebody else is probably a reasonable bet. Hence the vast degree of variety and originality that you see on the shelves of your local bookshop. So what qualifications have I got for doing a presentation? Well, I think you learn from your mistakes, and on that basis I've got a fair degree of expertise. My first book, took me over 10 years to write. The first draft was a monster at 180,000 words, of which 70,000 had to go. It was a suspense thriller about an accountant. When I put it out, it was far too expensive. The cover was poor, which we'll touch on in a minute. And then I sat back and wondered why I couldn't get an agent, a publisher, or actually any real sales. The sad truth in publishing, like anything else, is if you write a better book, will the world publishers and readers beat a path to your door? The answer is no. To borrow a business formula that I've taken from a management consultancy firm, the secret of having business success is to produce something that follows this formula. The secret of business success, A, comes from having something that is better, cheaper or different, B, C or D, than your competitors, which people W, want, plus V, value enough to buy, to the power of K, know about, minus X, that can't be Xeroxed, i.e. copied, that overall makes profit and money for you now. Quite a useful little reminder that. And the point when it comes to self-publishing, as opposed to simply writing, is that you do have to look at this part of the formula, that the product you're producing, the book, is something that people want, will value enough to buy, and they also have to know about it in order to make sure that they realise it's there to buy and can make a decision to do so. Because when you compare and contrast, a small business has got a product or service that they want to sell, and they have to do so at more than it costs to produce if they want to make a profit. As a self-publisher, you've got a book that you're going to need to sell, but obviously more than it costs to produce if you want to make a profit. There ain't much difference between a small business and a self-publisher. They both have to run a business. In fact, a self-publisher is a small business. Interestingly, looking at the world of business, you then have venture capitalists. These are organisations with funds available that are looking for opportunities to buy generally smaller businesses, to back them in terms of growing and developing their market share, in the hope of them being able to make large returns from the sales. They get a large number of approaches from businesses and business owners looking for funding, and they tend to rely on corporate finance advisors to act as a sort of screen to only bring them the deals that are worth doing. On the other hand, in the publishing area, you've got publishing houses. These are organisations who are looking for opportunities to buy books to back in the hope of making large returns from sales. And they get a large number of approaches from authors and tend to rely on agents as a screen to only bring them the deals that are worth doing. So you could be running a small business which develops a product or service, takes it to market and proves that a market exists, but then need the backing of a larger organisation with more funds to really exploit the opportunity and get the worldwide sales that you're looking for. As the publishing market develops, it seems to me that there's going to be an opportunity for self-publishers to take the same approach. Develop their product, their service, their book, their author, take it to market, demonstrate that it sells, demonstrate there is an audience for what they do, so that you can then not only submit your book for consideration, but submit it backed up by evidence that there is a real market out there that wants to buy it. So, if you're going to run your self-publishing business as a small business, what do you need to do to make a success of it? Well, you need to do all the things that a small business has to do to make a success of what it does. But I'd like to focus for a moment just on it as a particular activity, because I think as authors we tend to get tied up in looking at what we're producing and the art and the craft of creating something that people want to read, but I go back to the fact that if you build a better mousetrap, the world won't necessarily beat a path to your door. Potential readers have to be made aware of what you're offering, and that comes through marketing. So what does marketing cover? Well, I think you're going to cover three things. Firstly, market research, because if you're doing this as a business, it's not enough to think in terms of this is something that I want to write. You have to think, are there then going to be potential buyers for what I produce? Secondly, there is then marketing as it's generally understood, in terms of what do you offer to your customers and how do you provide it. And then thirdly, there is the activity of selling. How do you actually get them to buy? And for way of illustration, I'm going to use one of my books, Heavy Duty People, which is a biker thriller. So, my first question is there a potential market? Are there people who are likely to want to buy a biker-based thriller? Well, the American television company Fox TV have now produced 5 seasons of a series of programs called Sons of Anarchy, which are thrillers based around a biker gang. So if there's sufficient audience for a television company like Fox to think it's worthwhile making the 5th season of Sons of Anarchy, then the chances are that there are going to be a few people who might be interested in buying a book based on outlaw bikers. But the product you're selling isn't simply the words and the concept of your book. It's also about how the book is presented to potential customers. It's the quality of production, it's how it's positioned, its branding, its covers, and it's how it fits in with other things in the marketplace. So I'd like to touch on some of these just to illustrate what I'm talking about. For example, covers as a specific subject. Covers are important. Here's some feedback that I've had on Amazon which stress the importance of the cover. Now these are 5-star reviews on Amazon by readers, and no, I haven't written these. And I'll just bring up the underlined sections so they're easier to read. And here's what people are telling me about the cover of my book. It doesn't do it justice, and is partly why I hadn't considered it before. Only complaint is that the cover, blah blah. Covers are important signalling devices. They tell you whether something's a chick lit, a thriller, or a comedy just by glancing at them, because fairly obviously James Patterson's Toys isn't chick lit. Sophia Kinsell's 20s Girl isn't likely to be a thriller, although oddly My God-Awful Life turns out to be a comedy. So as a self-publisher interested in getting the right message out about my products, I've been having to work on how I do my covers as I've gone along. And to show what I mean, here are the covers of the first 3 books I've published. The first one, The Liquidator, you'll see that the text is extremely small, and that's a major problem if it's going to appear as a thumbnail image on, for example, Amazon or your website. If people can't read the image on the cover, they're much less likely to click on it or to think about buying it. The second book, Heavy Duty People, at least has an improvement in that the title is bigger, but the rest of the writing is still too small, and the picture is very evidently a very amateur job. For the third book, we have larger title, you can actually read that the book is by me, and the underlying image is a professionally shot one. As you'll see, having written the first biker-based book, Heavy Duty People, I then decided it'd be interesting to write a second and turn it into a small series. So what's the effect of having done this been on sales? Well, this chart shows you monthly sales by title, and I think it's interesting. The red parts of the bar are sales of the first biker book, Heavy Duty People. The green parts of the bar are sales of the second book, Heavy Duty Attitude. And you can quite clearly see that when the second book came out, sales of the first book increased, and in fact have continued to do so. I can't say for certain, but I think what's happening here is that in going out to get publicity for the second book, I am, in addition, promoting the first book. And if somebody is interested in reading the second book, they will generally, I suspect, want to have read the first one first. So the marketing effort being put into promoting the second book in a series has the byproduct of pushing up sales of the first book. The second part of the marketing mix, as it's known,